Welcome to the Chain Out Podcast with your hosts, Jeremy and Daryl.
Hey everyone, that's right, Jeremy and Daryl here, Season 2, Episode 60. We're back, baby.
60,
Daryl.
Yeah, we're back. Regularly scheduled programming, back together.
In the same place, the same room, ready to podcast and give you lots of great Canadian disc golf content. So we hope you had a great Christmas, a great New Year, and a great holiday season.
I did.
Did you?
Because I got my Trash Panda holiday disc swap. And thank you, Mackenzie.
Look at that. He's wearing a Tree Line Disc Golf Apparel shirt if you're listening with the audio there.
I got my 2 discs. I asked for overstable mid-range. Got an Evader and a Justice. And a free t-shirt. So I'm happy.
2 discs and a t-shirt, because really it's just 1 disc is what the
minimum of 1.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, guys, another quick reminder when we've got you here, we're sponsored by Cardinal Disc Golf this year and happy to be on the Crimson team. They got some great gear. Our gear is finally moving. We've got some stuff ordered, so you're going to see even more jerseys than just my wonderful Miguel one that I'm wearing here. And we got a discount code for you if you want to buy your own gear, and that is ChainOut. Use it on the Cardinal Disc Golf website, and you'll get 10% off.
Absolutely.
And that's not the only exciting Cardinal news, hey?
No, we knew about it for a little while.
Yeah, we tried our best to keep it under wraps.
Even though Jeremy didn't want to. He wanted to blurt it out, but I said, no, let that person announce. They finally announced. Couldn't have asked for a better teammate. Gabby Lee also is on Team Cardinal. She's on the Glide team.
Yes, so that's a step above us, or 2 or 3 steps above us.
Absolutely. We're on Team Crimson. So many great players or people on our team, on Team Crimson. So many great people on the whole team. A lot of new players announced on that Glide team.
Yeah, and also some other bigger names that with all the things that are getting announced here in 2025, some other names getting on there too. So it's fantastic. It's going to be great. And we'd already talked about how wonderful it was having Mason on the team and having Miguel and now having Gabby. Like, you're really getting a feel for the type of personalities. And we always wonder, how do we fit in there? I think we fit in there okay.
Yeah, we've got our own little niche in there, I think. I think we deserve to be here.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, Daryl, not only that, we got giveaways that have been outstanding, hey?
We've got a few to get through, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you didn't see the Christmas and New Year's episodes, I got myself a Gyropalooza box for Christmas. I was going to give away 1 disc, but then I found 3 discs in there that I would be willing to part with. So we put up a post and said, hey, what disc would you like if you won? We're going to give away 1 disc. And we did that spin this morning. So I think we're going to show that.
We are. I'm surprised. I don't know. What were you surprised about when people were commenting on what disc they wanted? What kind of stood out to you?
Well, the thing was I thought all 3 were pretty equal.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was like
apparently not.
A Glow Tempo was the landslide one that people wanted.
Are you sure you want to give this one away?
Well, that's what I was wondering.
It seems like you've missed a trick here. It's like everybody's like, this is like the holy grail of discs, and they want it.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's the ignorance is your benefit in that fact. Because I got a Tempo.
Yeah.
I got an MVP one from before with the Chickadee on it. I think it was from the Open. Yeah, so I was like, I got a Tempo. I don't need more than 1.
You don't need another one. Okay, I'm going to run the video right now. So drum roll.
Wow, the build up with that music, I loved it.
There you go. I put it beside everybody's name with what disc they wanted to. It didn't show all on the wheel there, but I think like 99% was Tempo.
So congratulations to Jared Lauder.
Yep.
He's getting the Tempo.
He's getting a Tempo.
So there we are. We got the Tempo here. We did light it up here because it is a glow, and it's actually a 2-tone glow. So I think it's blue and green. Might be blue for the base and green for the rim, vice versa. But Jared, we'll get that one to you. I think he's a local guy, so we know him.
I think he's actually no fix. He's on Team Cardinal.
Oh, is he?
He is on Team Cardinal.
Oh, okay.
But that was the first spin. Jared.
I didn't even know who it was until you just showed me.
There you go. No, Jared, I did it earlier today.
Yeah. So that's one of our giveaways, and we still have 2. Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
I should say something else, everybody out there. I know that
you were going to give 3 discs away.
I was going to give one of 3 discs away.
Yeah.
So I had the Vanish as well as the Reactor were the other 2 discs that I was willing to give away. And I have an idea, Daryl. I'm still willing to part with these 2 discs. Wow. And what I want to do with those is I want to show Cardinal that we're trying to support them as best we can. So what we're going to do is if you're looking to get a jersey, you're going to get 10% off by using the code CHAINOUT. And the first 2 people who use our code, I'm sure Kevin will let us know.
Yeah.
They're going to get these 2 discs. And that's what we're going to do.
So the first person is going to get 1 disc. The second person is going to get the second disc.
Exactly.
There you go.
So that's how we're going to get rid of the other discs and give them away. But that's not all.
That's not all. We've got more to give away.
We've been sitting on a couple of giveaways since the Cold Garden one. And again, in our Christmas and New Year's episodes, we brought them up. So we have a local disc golf hat here, as well as a patch. And then we also have a local disc golf chalk bag and a patch. And what we're asking you to do is to go on to Local Disc Golf's YouTube site, because he's got a lot of great videos Ryan does over there.
Yep.
And find one that you like. And in the comments, make a comment about it and tag CHAINOUT. Put @CHAINOUT in there. And then you will, first 2 that we see show up on our YouTube, we're going to give away those prizes. And this is the last chance, Daryl.
Is it the first two that show up on ours or that show up on his video?
Oh, on his video, but they'll tag us, so we'll see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. If nobody's going to do that, that's fine. We'll find another way to use them. I think you could use a new hat.
I could use a new hat or a dry bag. Or,
yeah.
You don't have a dry bag, so you can have it. Yeah. I like hats.
Yeah. So there you go. That's our giveaways for now. We're going to try to have a whole bunch more for you in the new year. But let's keep moving on. What do we got happening after this episode?
After this episode, for people that don't know, is that on our Patreon page, we like to do our Around the Basket episodes. It's a little bit more of a freer talk. This week, we're going to have a guest on that we've had on before. Mm-hmm. He is the owner of Yukon Disc Golf, Ryan Norquay.
Yes.
Yeah, we're excited to have him back on again. We'll be catching up with him, discussing all about course difficulty.
Oh, and there's a lot to say about that. So I'm excited for that conversation.
Absolutely. The link is in our Patreon, so head over to our Patreon. Click on the link if you want to join us.
All right, and let's get to the interview.
Let's go for it.
All right, tonight's guest is from the Big Smoke, Hollywood North, The Six. I think I got that right. Otherwise known as Toronto, Ontario. He has been a PDGA member since 1986 and has been working with the PDGA since 1997. He was inducted into the Disc Golf Hall of Fame in 2003. Daryl, how we get guests like this? I don't know. His current titles with the PDGA are both the International Director and Canada Manager. Let's welcome Brian Hoeniger to the show. Hey.
Cheers, everyone. Just to let the viewing know, I appreciate the intro and the acknowledgement of some of the things that I've done. But I like to say, beyond it all, I'm just one of the boys.
Yeah, that's how everyone wants to be remembered. Hey, just I've got all of these accolades, but I'm just out there playing disc golf like the rest of you. So it's awesome to have you join us tonight, Brian. How were your holidays as we're kind of getting into the new year? Did you stick around Toronto? What did your holidays look like this year?
My holidays were relaxed. Yeah, me and my wife stuck around Toronto. I was traveling in November, and I'll be traveling again in a few weeks. But Christmas was nice because Christmas and New Year's were on Wednesday. We had Boxing Day on a Thursday, so it was almost like you had 10 straight days off because a lot of the staff at HQ catch up on the days that they're out off over Christmas. So it's pretty quiet and you can get things done and relax and have some good food at home. And it was cool.
Yeah. What more do you need than that?
So I guess you're pretty much back at it as everybody else. It was kind of this Monday felt like, okay, this is the real start to the work week again, and we're all at it.
I would say that. Yeah, Monday the 6th was, I mean, I got a lot of done in the meantime because there was nothing to disturb me, but the pace really picked up in my email box.
Fair enough. Well, Brian, we like to start off all of our interviews to find out a little bit about how our guests got into disc golf, but just asking you that question is a little bit boring. So we've kind of got something fun that we do. I come up with a really far-fetched origin story about how you got into disc golf. I relate it to a movie. We see if our listeners can guess the movie, and I'm going to go into it right now. So
Okay.
maybe when you were younger, you grew up on an island in Lake Ontario. You started playing disc golf and got pretty good. To stake your claim on the sport, you knew you had to go to the mainland and prove yourself in the bustling disc golf capital that is Toronto. You quickly took over the scene with your amazing skills and persuasive but friendly demeanor. Before long, nothing disc golf related happened in Toronto without you knowing about it. People came from far and wide to see your collection of discs, and when they'd arrive to see them, you'd raise your hands, look around the room, and declare, "Say hello to my little friends." Now, maybe that's not quite how you got into disc golf, so why don't you tell us how it really happened?
Well, first of all, I live on Toronto Island. It was really disc golf that brought me to Toronto Island. I grew up in Midtown Toronto, and I was probably on the island a couple times when I was a kid. But otherwise, it was when I discovered the island disc golf course that I really got attached to this place. So my roots in disc golf and before that frisbee in the early to mid 1970s. I was a frisbee fanatic, as was my friends, and we're basically talking throw and catch different ways wherever we can, make up lots of games, skip shots on tennis courts, even some early golf where you're trying to hit the trees down the park and so on. But as I mentioned to you when we were chatting a few minutes ago before the show, there was an Edmonton episode. I spent a winter in Edmonton circa 1978, and my frisbee playing partner and I were threatened with citizen's arrest one day for playing throw and catch across Jasper Avenue during rush hour. But in terms of disc golf, some of my longtime buddies from Toronto discovered the Toronto Island course soon after it went in, circa 1979, and it was, I think, in 1982 that they said, "Come on down and check this frisbee golf game out." And I went and I played once on the island and I had fun. It was 2 years later in 1984, which was my summer of tree planting in BC while I was finishing up university, that I went down between contracts to Vancouver. And my friend said, "Hey, I heard on CBC this morning that there's a disc golf course opening up in Queen Elizabeth Park, and we need to go." So off we went, and I bought my very first golf disc there, a Whammo 86 mold.
Right.
And within a year or two later, I was pretty fanatical. I think in 80, now from 85 to 90, I mean, my degree is in international development. My wife was a nurse, and we went and worked in Africa for a bunch of years. And while I was there, I had a local basket welded, and I would come home every year for 5 weeks and just go disc golf nuts on the island and play a few tournaments. But in terms of the PDGA and becoming a member in 86, I mean, there were, I would be playing with the guys who were more advanced in the game amongst the small island community at the time. And they said, there's a players association and there's even a world championships. And I said, "Oh my God, you're kidding. That is so cool. I am in." And that's when I joined the PDGA. Now, I was away again for 3 more years in Southern Africa. But when I came home in mid-1990, I went disc golf gaga, playing as many tournaments as I can, traveling, across Ontario. What we had then was the Can-Am circuit, and occasionally further afield in the States, like we would drive most years to Cincinnati, which was 500 miles. We flew a couple times to Columbia, Missouri for the Mid-America Open. I played in the World Championships every year from 1990 to, let me look at my discs here, Minnesota in 2001, and then a few years later as a rookie grandmaster in 2007. So that's
Nice.
some of the background, of how I got involved.
Well, and you know, one of the things too, Brian, when we're talking to you, like Daryl and I are going into our second and third year of disc golf, if you can believe it. Well, we've gone like gaga crazy right from the start as well. And like, if I've got the math right, are you going into like your 39th year of disc golf? Is that kind of where we're at? Are you hitting 40? Where are you at? Would you think?
Well, I mean, it was 40 years ago this summer that we went to Queen Elizabeth Park for its opening.
Yeah.
I think it was 87. It was in June 87 that I joined the PDGA. So that would be 38 years, and 2025, I think, would be 39. Yeah.
Wow.
Officially. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, we love it. And, you know, our listeners love to hear, one of the things we've realized is we have a lot of listeners who might have joined at the COVID boom or kind of in that time. So when we can talk about what disc golf was like in the early days, they love to hear some of that. So you've given us a bit of that. But one of the things that kind of came to my mind as you were talking about going to these events, people don't realize that there was no internet at that time. We weren't doing internet yet. That didn't come for a little bit. How did you even find out that there were tours and that? Was it all word of mouth? Were there posters up on the trees at the course? How were you figuring that out?
Well, I mean, as you know, I didn't play many tournaments before I was a member. Probably, Vancouver would have been the only one. And then I was away most of those first few years overseas. But I mean, beyond that, there was a Can-Am circuit. It was one of the bigger series in disc golf at the time, and it covered Southern Ontario, a couple of places in Michigan, Columbus, Ohio, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Rochester and Lewiston, New York. Lewiston is near Niagara Falls. And so that was the real circuit that all of us fanatics from that area played basically every tournament in for a number of years. And, then we had our trips that I mentioned further afield. And as I said, I went to the Worlds a bunch of times. I mean, the first Worlds I went to was described to those who were more familiar with the Worlds that preceded it. This was 1990, a few months after I'd gotten back from Africa, was in Scottsdale, Arizona. Okay. And in Fountain Hills, the Fountain Hills course still today.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, if you can imagine, I'm warming up in mid-October in Toronto and it's 10 degrees Celsius and the wind is howling. And we get off the plane in Phoenix and it's 92 Fahrenheit, not a cloud in the sky. I mean, real holiday golf, which was really my favorite. And that was, it was 4 good courses. Climo won his first Worlds.
Okay.
And it was just one of my real memories in the sport. One of my favorite memories of the sport. So, I mean, what we're talking about, one of the reasons we're talking about, we played the Can-Am circuit and we're driving to New York or Pennsylvania or whatever. I mean, disc golf was in its infancy in Canada at the time. We had 2 courses in Toronto that had been put in by Orange Crush and Canadians' equivalent of Whammo Sports, which was called Irwin Toys, Toronto-based toy company then that made frisbees. And they sponsored the first 2 courses in Toronto, on the island and in Etobicoke Centennial Park. And then there was 1 course in St. Thomas, Ontario, which for many years was the small town hotbed of disc golf in Canada, just south of London, Ontario, halfway between Toronto and Detroit. And then there was a temp course that we played once that was just there for the tournament, also in St. Thomas, in a beautiful park called Pinafore. But that was it. I mean, it was in the late 90s that places like Bronte Creek and Peterborough and Ottawa got their first courses. Aside from that, in BC, there was Pender Island was a long-standing course with object targets. There, I told you about Queen Elizabeth Park, which opened in the summer of '84. That's when I was tree planting. I imagine you guys may know better than I what the first course was in Alberta. I would imagine it was either in Calgary or something that Craig Burroughs Johnson made happen.
I think it was Wetaskiwin, right?
Well, we know there was a Wetaskiwin and Rundle Park, and also I believe Canmore were some of the early courses from what we understand in the Alberta area. But but continue.
And then, I mean, it wasn't until probably the the early 2000s that the first courses went in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and Quebec was a bit later than that, and the Maritimes, led by two superstars, Ben Smith and Duncan Dixon, really took off about 12 years ago, probably now. So, I mean, there's not many tournaments to play. I mean, it's not like today where there's a,
You're
if you're,
spoiled for
let's say
choice.
you live somewhere like, I don't know, Des Moines, Iowa, or Charlotte, North Carolina, where there's like a tournament 46 weeks of the year or something.
Yeah.
Um, it was like there was 10 or 11 tournaments that if you were prepared to travel up to 400 miles or so, that would be your circuit,
Right.
because that's all the courses that there were.
Right.
And, beyond that, as I said, we traveled, just to be able to go to bigger tournaments like the circuit right now, the equivalent back then. I mean, the A tier was originally called the Super Tour, and a few of these Super Tour tournaments were the Cincinnati Edgewood Electric Open and the Mid America Open in Columbia, Missouri, that I referenced, and of course the World Championships, which I started going to in 1990. But it's a world of difference
Yeah.
between then and what the scene is now. And that's the
Yeah.
scene I know best, because that was the height of my playing career, which largely ended after the World Championships in 2007.
Right.
Okay.
It's so great to hear all those early memories that you had. And I just recently finished listening to Scott Stokely's book, Growing Up Disc Golf. And he talks about like his first introduction, first discs that he was getting. Like you would walk around on these new courses, or, the first courses, and you would see bits of discs laying on the ground because they were so fragile that when you would throw them, it's not uncommon to go through a couple of discs just by, once they get beat in. Is that some of your early memories as well?
Well, in the Canadian winter, if you threw your Stingray
Well, yeah.
into it, if you hit a light post with your Stingray, it was done.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought you might ask me what's my favorite disc. Now, I'm not sure this is my favorite disc, but it is a beautiful disc on my wall that was given to me. But just to give the viewers an idea, have a look at this: 1980 Toronto Island Disc Golf Tournament, the first one.
Wow.
Given to me by an old player in Toronto, and this is a Whammo 70 mold or something like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, what a piece of history, hey?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well,
But no, the discs were a lot more fragile then. I mean, it was in the mid 80s, just before I came, that the first real golf discs were invented, the first bevel edge discs by Dunapace and Selinsky of Innova.
Yeah.
And, these large lip discs that you see today, there was nothing like that. I mean, there was evolution of drivers over time, but, and in the early 2000s, discs like the Valkyrie really took the game forward. The Cyclone by Discraft would be another one. It was a little earlier than 2000, but these long distance drivers with these lips like this that you see now, I don't even know how to throw one of them because my hand just doesn't have the muscle memory for something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that was it, I think, too, if I understand right, Brian, is in those early days when you would go to a Worlds tournament, because the discs were not flying further, it wasn't that same setup that we have now. You'd go to a Worlds and you'd play like 8 rounds or 9 rounds to compete. Is that right?
We would play like in the Arizona Worlds would be a perfect example. 4 courses, play them twice each in regulation, qualify for the semis if you're in the top third, and then the finals would be like the top 2 groups of men and the top 1 group of women. But
holy crow!
I mean, that was the way it was then. All the tournaments we went to, but you're driving 300 miles on Friday morning or whatever, get a quick practice round in. You would then play probably 4 rounds in the 2 days on the same course. That was typical.
That's what happened. Yeah.
I mean, the courses were shorter. Sure, the average hole was probably more like 300 to 330 or something like that, 100 to 110 meters. But I mean, when the technology then, I mean, I remember throwing a scorpion at the Phoenix Worlds on a hole that Kenny remembers birdieing that clinched it for him. That was like 430. And I was 25 short on that hole with a scorpion in one of the rounds. So, I mean,
Okay.
we could still throw, 400 feet, and a few people, Stokely being one of them, Farmer
Yeah.
obviously another, could probably throw between 450 and 500.
Right.
Yeah.
Forehand and backhand.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it was mostly, and the other thing about the game then was Stokely asides, nobody threw forehand. They threw forehand for emergency approach shots out of a bad lie.
Yeah.
Right.
120 feet and in. But what we did instead is we all knew how to throw rollers.
Right.
And
Okay.
rollers were a key part of the game. Yeah.
Yes. And that would get you some of that
And,
added
I mean,
distance or around an obstacle, those types of things.
yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, the Stingray was, the great roller disc of that era. And what else was I going to say? Because we didn't have forehands, we could all throw Anheuser or reverse curve really well.
I
Which
gotcha.
you don't see the players who have forehands throwing today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not to that same skill level, I'm sure.
Stable AVR, stable rock, and just throw it on, hold its line for, 250 to 350. And that was another key shot in your bag.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, we love hearing all about that, Brian, and we want to move on to the PDGA. But before we do, in 2003, you were inducted into the Disc Golf Hall of Fame. That's an honor that not many of us are going to receive. We want you to tell us a little bit about that moment and what that means to you.
Well, it's a cool story because, I was inducted because of the quality of work that I did my first handful of years as PDGA administrator and then as the first executive director. And Al Speedy Guerrero, who was then the Hall of Fame administrator, would phone up the office wanting to talk to my wife, who was the memberships manager, because he wanted to know, little tidbits about me that he could put on my Hall of Fame plaque. And occasionally he would get me. And so what he would do is he would ask me about the two other guys who were going in with me. Let me look at my disc on the wall here.
If you did your research, Jeremy, you would know who he was inducted in with.
Mark Horn, and Stancil Johnson, two guys from California with numbers under 100.
Wow.
Okay.
But so I'm sitting at the award ceremony for the World Championships, and Speedy is assumed the front of the stage, and he started his spiel. I have no idea what's about to happen. And he's got the disc on the table, and I reach over to get the disc because I want to see the cool disc that Mark Horn and Stancil Johnson are going into the Hall of Fame on. And I look, and there's a third name there, and I went, "Oh my God!"
Oh.
And I was inducted about 60 seconds later. So,
oh, wow.
It was a pinch me, I'm dreaming moment. And
Yeah.
So
it was a complete blindside up until 60 seconds before your name was read out.
That's what happened. That's what
awesome.
happened. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So was then were you expected to do a speech? And you usually hear in the Oscars or the Golden Globes or that type of thing, the people have an idea, so they have a speech prepared. But in that case, if you were that surprised, you just had to go off the cuff, did you?
Oh, I did. Well, I mean, I couldn't believe it. But I was, I did have enough composure to thank all the people who had really been meaningful to me in my time in the sport, and especially the handful of previous years when I started working for the PDGA.
Right. No, that's amazing. Hey, Daryl.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So if we did our research right, if we're going to move to the PDGA, you started working with them in 1997, if that's correct.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to get an idea was, we know you've held a number of different roles. So how did you get involved with the PDGA? And then what are some of those roles that you've held over the year? You've kind of alluded to them, but.
Sure. Well, I mean, disc golf was obviously my fanatical hobby. at the time, but my real job was working for a Canadian NGO, non-governmental organization that provided humanitarian assistance in Africa. And after we came home in 1990, I continued to work for them out of the office in Toronto for another 6 or 7 years, writing project proposals, getting funding from CEDA, the Canadian government international development funding arm, and so on. But I had done that for long enough. There had been changes to that little organization. It used to be small and intimate. Now it was becoming bureaucratic. The donors were demanding so much more that it basically took away from actually getting the work done in these places.
Right.
So my time there had basically come to an end, and I was looking for another job, and I heard that the PDGA administrator job was open. And this was, this is a U.S. 501c4 not-for-profit. And I worked my ass off to convince the then board of directors that I could run it cost efficiently from my house in Toronto. And in fact, this very room in my bungalow on Toronto Island served as the PDJ headquarters and office from 1997 to 2005, when me and my wife, the memberships manager, moved to Georgia when the International Disc Golf Center was being built.
Wow.
So in terms of, now to give you a little story, I mean, when I was hired, the PDGA was a one person staffed organization. The administrator was the only position. And in the early 90s, there had been an administrator who had dropped the ball in terms of the management of this young organization. And then Commissioner John Houck, a name that is well known within the sport, basically had to take possession of the office. He had one of his close friends' wife, whose name was Becky Powell. She was a world champion in 1995 or so. She became the administrator in a little cow town where they lived west of Dallas-Fort Worth called Weatherford.
Right.
And I flew down there to get trained by her. She had a one-room office in a tinderbox of a little building on the square in Weatherford, Texas, that the cattle trucks used to rattle around. And I mean, this was shit brown shag carpeting on the floor. She had one, of that time computer, a printer, a bunch of boxes of magazines, a bunch of boxes of directories, a bunch of boxes of the membership application forms from the last couple of years. And that was basically what I inherited. And she trained me for 2 days on what was then the young database. It was a MS-DOS database.
Right.
And trained me for a couple of days. And then we had arranged for a semi to come and pick up the stuff. And when the semi arrived, it had Ontario plates. And we put all the stuff in it, which was basically one pallet. Said goodbye. I flew home to Toronto, and I went out to a warehouse in Mississauga a few days later and picked it up and drove it in a van over to Toronto Island and set up the office, as I said, in this very room that I'm talking to you now.
So that's it. So
And
between those years,
that served as headquarters from 97 to 04. I think it was at the beginning of 03 that I was promoted to become the first executive director.
Right.
And in 05, after a year and 3 tries at it, we got our visas to go work in the States. We were going for a serious visa called an L1A, which is an executive transfer visa. And the reason we were going for that was because it came with full spousal privileges. In other words, my wife, as the memberships manager, with all due respect, was, for all intents and purposes, a glorified secretarial position.
Right.
So she's not going to get a working visa for the States for something like that. But with the visa that I eventually got, it came with an L2 visa, which gave her full working privileges.
Right.
And it took us 3 applications of about document packages this thick And the reason they eventually said yes because a guy called Pete May, who's also well known in the sport, based out of Augusta, Georgia, um, who worked for one of the wealthier men in Georgia, had friends like state senators. And
Oh,
one of the
okay.
state senators added a letter of support
Wow.
to the package. And I think when U.S. immigration said that, they went approved.
Yeah.
Right.
So from
So then we
1997
drove down.
to 2004, PDGA was
Right
run
there.
from right there.
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's that one little piece of history right there.
Yeah, and for
So-
the first 5 years, this was also the fulfillment house. So, and
Okay.
what that meant was my wife's, as the membership manager, after banging the memberships into the database every week, and also banging in tournament results, would do the fulfillment packages to all the renewing and new members who had received
Right.
that week, and then we would haul it off to Canada Post and dump it into one of their bins. That was a pretty cool story because, we live on the island. There's no vehicles on this island where I live.
Okay.
So we were lucky. There was a Canada Post outlet that I would go in there once a week and say, okay, I need 100 stickers for $4.35 for, standard new membership package with a disc and a mini and a magazine.
Yeah.
I need so many stickers of this value because those people also want a directory and so on. And I got the lady there who, because I would cause quite a queue saying I need, 200 stickers and I'm going to write you a check for like $800 or something. And she said, you know what, just phone in your order and I'll get it prepared and then just come in and we'll tell you how much to write the check for. That was the first piece of luck. The second piece of luck was there was a Canada Post sorting center about 300 meters from the Toronto Island ferry docks.
Ah.
So I would take my bicycle and I would pull a cart with the bicycle that would have these jumbo Canada Post mailing bags, and I would cycle right into the sorting house because everything was already postages, and I would just throw the bags into the bin, and they would be in the system and on their way
There you
to all
go.
the members and all the people who had ordered merch.
No delays.
So that was pretty lucky.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Logistically speaking, that was, it was almost meant, okay, it's cool that you've got this job, Brian. We're going to make it easy. We're going to make it work for you.
Yeah.
It's all those happy coincidences that just happened to be, right? That's,
Yeah.
that's how everything fell into place. It just happened to be that you're right next to a post office outlet that you could just do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So jumping
to
ahead.
continue, I'll continue
carry
where we
on.
were. So we moved to Georgia in April 2005, and by that time the International Disc Golf Center project has just gotten underway in Wildwood Park, one county north of Augusta, Georgia, the ball golf mecca, home of the Masters tournament.
Right.
And I want to cite a very close friend from me and the guy who became executive director after I did, who I handed over to, Brian Graham, because Brian Graham was the disc golfer who was most instrumental in getting us the International Disc Golf Center project.
Right.
Anyway, so we moved to Georgia and we stayed. Our visas were for 3 years. Our visas were for 3 years, but if we stayed away from Toronto Island for more than 3 years, we would have to give up our little bungalow here. That's the legislation governing this unique community.
Right.
So we got there in April 2005, and the IDGC opened in April 2007. And by then we had told the PDGA that we were going to retire from these positions and move back to our house in Toronto, which we did not want to lose. And in 2006, I had started the international program. And I became, when I moved back to Canada, I became the international director, which for many years was a part-time job.
Okay.
And I also became the Canada manager, and we can get into that a bit.
Yeah.
But the international program, the reason I started that was we would see these far throwing Swedes once a year at the Worlds. There were no, we only had like 150 current PDGA members who are outside of USA and Canada,
Right.
more than half of whom were in Japan. And I wanted to get programming in our PDGA brand that would attract these players to be more involved with the PDGA, and for the PDGA also to sanction events in their countries,
Right.
and so on. And that had humble beginnings, but it's been a big success outside of USA and Canada. The PDGA has relations with 52 other countries today, and we've got 21,000 current members in Europe and about another 4,000 between Australia, New Zealand, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. But I digress. The next thing I want to tell you about is, okay, why PDGA Canada?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're Canadians. We are not Americans. Don't imagine that we think we're Americans. We are Canadians.
Exactly.
Don't tell us what to do. Thank you. We can do our own house.
Yeah.
So the Canadian, the small at the time disc golf community in Canada, really thought the idea that the PDGA was headquartered in Canada was cool.
Right.
Now there's something that the PDGA is doing in and for Canada, if you will.
Yeah.
But then we moved back to the States. And of course, as Canadians, we are sending our membership money to the States. At the time, we were sending sanctioning fees and player fees as well to the States. And the Canadians are going, well, we're sending all our money to the States. What is the States doing? What is the PDGA doing specifically for Canada?
Right.
And so the idea I hit on was that we would, originally it was the sanctioning fees as well, but as the database has become more and more technology driven, and you send your money there just like any place in the world sends their money for sanctioning there, and systems spits you into the schedule, sends you a confirmation, you've got your event page in the database, and so on. So that's why you still send your sanctioning fee there, but the player fees, which for many years, it's just changed this year that started, but for many years it was, A tier $4, B tier $6, $3, C tier $2, and $10 if you're not current, as long as you're playing in what used to be B or C tiers. You had to be current to play in an A tier. Now you have to be current to play in A and B's and C. So what we did is, and this is convenient as well for Canadians, because they're paying their entry fees for an event in Canada in Canadian dollars.
Right.
Yes.
And the TD does not want to say, well, instead of giving you $3, we have to send $3 to the States, so you're going to give me $3.75. So that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No.
So what I did was I set it up so that PDGA Canada, which is a small office of PDGA USA, it's registered as the Canada arm of the USA not-for-profit mother company.
Right.
That's how it's registered with the province of Ontario. It has a bank account and a PayPal account, and all those player fees come into me, and they go out as what is essentially one of the biggest sponsorship programs that the PDGA has anywhere. And it's
right.
We fund new courses, we fund course upgrades. We sponsor all the biggest tournaments in Canada, nationals, all the provincial championships, all the A tiers. We sponsor the women's events. We sponsor junior initiatives. What else do I have here? We sponsor Parked Pro, who we're going to talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
We sponsor Team Canada, and so on. And that is how the PDGA gives back to Canada. That is the justification for why PDGA Canada exists.
Right.
And we've got a few expenses, but Revenue Canada, who I talked to long and hard about this when I set it up, says you have to pay HST, or GST as it's known in Alberta. So what I do at the end of every year is I've done my spreadsheets of this is all the income I've received into the bank and PayPal accounts. These are all the sponsorships and other expenses. In other words, the what goes against the income. And on January the 2nd, after I've done the year-end financial report and sent it to headquarters, the next thing I do is I calculate how much GST, HST do we owe.
Right.
And that has to be, and that is 5/100ths of every dollar we get from Alberta, 13/113ths of every dollar we get from Ontario, and so on. It's not difficult to calculate because it's all spreadsheets.
Right.
And you just fill down times these numbers times 5 divided by 105. And then of course we deduct all the HST/GST that we paid on a few things over the year, and we send a check to Revenue Canada, which a week ago was for the calendar year 2024. I've got my financial report in front of me. Actually, it goes in because it happened in January this year. It's not in this financial report. Last year's is. So a year ago we sent RevCan just under 3,000, and a year from now we will send. Last week, which is a new fiscal year, I sent Revenue Canada about $3,300, and that's what we have to do to satisfy Revenue Canada for existing in the Great White North.
Well, we appreciate it, Brian, and the fact that we're even seeing the comments coming in from the listeners is just even giving us that transparency and that openness about what PDGA Canada is doing for us. People are loving it. That's something that you don't always get to know, and thanks for sharing that with us. Now, I want to take it I love the Canada side about it, but that's only one of the two arms that you're doing here. The other one is the international director, and so you're in Canada, you're taking care of PDGA Canada, but are you on the road? Are you flying a lot? Are you heading to all of these countries? How many times are you heading out of the country in a year?
I travel overseas. Well, it's picking up again because, of course, it shut down big time for COVID, and then it only sort of started by trickles after COVID. But I think I traveled 2 or 3 times last year, and this year it'll probably be 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
Out of country. I mean, I go to Finland almost every summer for the European Open. And of course, this year it's a bigger show because we've got one major in Estonia, which is this unbelievable tournament called the Disc Golf Festival.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, we've got the World Championships at the traditional home of the European Open in Tampere, Nokia, Finland.
Right.
So I've been doing that. And aside from that, this past year, I was in Colombia in November, first time I had been for disc golf in Latin America. And that, if you look at the PDGA.com cover page at the latest blogs, you'll see there's a blog about the training of trainers programs we ran in Colombia in November. So I was there for that.
Right.
And this year I have the privilege of going to Philippines and Thailand in February. In Philippines, I'm meeting Maria Luisa Bartolome, who is our superstar country coordinator, has single-handedly developed the sport in a big way in the Philippines. She's getting the PDGA Volunteer of the Year award.
Okay, awesome.
And I'm going to Chiang Mai, Thailand, which is a renowned destination, beautiful Buddhist temples, but it is it's Koh Samui, an island of Thailand off the west coast, off the east coast actually, was the number one place and is still a going concern for disc golf in Thailand, but the epicenter of disc golf in Thailand is now Chiang Mai.
Okay.
So I've never been there. I am going there, and I'm going to do business with the leaders of disc golf in Thailand, and the same thing then in the Philippines. It's a whirlwind trip. I'll be back home in 17 days. 12 time zones twice.
We did notice that you're not just going there for business. You're actually going to play in the 3rd annual Chiang Mai Open, which is kind of a big deal because you haven't played in a tournament, according to UDisc or your PDGA, sorry. You haven't played since 2019 in a competitive tournament.
And 2019 was just because we were training our new staff in Finland, and there was a little C tier in March when it was like plus 2 degrees Celsius. And the other guy with me said, we got to play the tournament. I said, okay, I'll play the tournament. But Chiang Mai, the TD there, Aaron Herman, who I've been in touch with quite a lot planning this trip, said, you haven't signed up yet. In other words, he thought I was coming to play.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I wasn't intending on it but I will play for fun. I played more in
Yeah.
Colombia actually in November than I have in the previous 6 or 7 years. So,
I was just going to mention that
and
with you.
at one point I found my putt again. So
Oh,
There it is.
great.
it's fun.
It's always good to find that again once you lose it. You must that must be one of the obviously it's one of the benefits that you travel to these places, but you get to play on these great courses. Do you get to play much anymore when you're obviously not in any tournaments and things like that? But when you get to travel to
I
all
do
these,
not play much.
you don't
As
play
I
much
just
at all
said, I
anymore.
played more in Colombia in 1 week than I had in the previous 6 or 7 years. When
Gotcha.
I returned to Canada in 2007 from opening the IDGC, my other job, as I told you, international director, I worked for the PDGA half time. The other half of the time, I worked for the same guy who sent us to Africa, who had since
Okay.
started a long distance bicycle tour company that cycles across the continents. And that
Oh.
became my hobby. I became their accountant and their tour support. And once a year, I would jump on my bike somewhere far overseas and cycle a few thousand kilometers. And
This life, hey?
It's amazing.
that is my source of endorphins.
Yes. Oh, fantastic, Brian. So
So I
wonderful.
traded, in this. It's also disc golf. When I cashed at the 2007 Worlds and Grandmasters, but by then I had done it all. I played the Japan Open, cashed in the European Open once, played 12 or 13 Worlds, as I said. I had done it all in this.
Yeah.
So, and the other problem is as you get older and as you play less and less, especially if you hardly play at all, when you go out and play, your head knows what you want to do,
Yeah.
and your body laughs at you. Yeah, 'cause I've also had some injuries. My knee
Okay.
is compromised. I hyperextended this muscle warming up in February to go to Arizona again, of all places, about 25 years ago, and it's never been the same. And then when you go play, I mean, it takes me a couple of days to start throwing 250 accurately, and
Right.
I used to cash at World Championships, so
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well,
long
Brian.
distance cycling is pretty cool too.
Oh, it is. Like everything
speak
you're
to
talking
Sophia.
about us. We're seeing that right. As Daryl's saying, Sophia Donica puts out a lot of videos there of her doing some biking too. So it's a good crossover sport. But if we can, let's get to Canada. Now we'll come back to Canada and just kind of talk about what does 2025 look like in Canada for disc golf from the PDGA perspective. Is there anything that you guys have planned or anything specific that you guys are looking forward to for us that we can look forward to?
Right. Well, I mean, I work as my PDGA Canada rolls about 25% of my time. So we're talking 10 hours a week.
Right.
And it's largely around managing the incoming and outgoing finances. And it's, I also deal with a lot of the emails that come in from Canadians, but this beautiful thing that the PDGA created a few years ago called the event support team. So all those emails I get now from Canada that say, this is a situation I think I might have at my event. How do I deal with this? I just press forward to the event support team.
There you go.
Gotcha.
So that's because this all keeps my life manageable.
Yeah.
Right.
Because first of all, what happened when we came out of COVID when we were coming out of COVID and disc golf went boom, I could not balance the two jobs anymore.
Right.
So I went to the executive director, then Joe Shargwilaf, and I said, Joe, you've got to make the international director full-time position, whether it's me or someone else. And he said, let's talk. And an hour or so later, we had an agreement. And I gave the bicycle tour company the bad news that I was unfortunately going to stop working for them. Canada, back to Canada.
Yeah.
So the main activity is that one, and that's a big deal, as I said, because that is sponsoring all the big tournaments, sponsoring all the women's and juniors, First Nations and other visible minorities within the sport initiatives and so on. In terms of some specific things, Well, first of all, we have the World Games. Disc golf is back in the World Games for the first time in 24 years this coming
Yes.
summer in Chengdu, China.
Yep.
So we will be facilitating the costs of the Canadian male and female player who will be going there. And they will be chosen by Can Disc Golf and by Craig Sheether, who
Right.
has done an unbelievable job of captaining Team Canada since the WIFDIF World Teams Championship began, the first edition being in Vancouver in 2017, where I was actually the TD.
Okay.
And I want to mention another thing that we're doing that we actually started this year is we started a Canadian Volunteer of the Year award.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
first one this past summer, in fact, went to Craig, by and large, because of everything he's done for Team Canada, which has won a gold medal, 2 bronzes, should have won the first one in Vancouver. In the regulation round robin, we were easily the best team. And then they did not deliver the goods on Saturday to the point where they went in as the number 1 seed and they came out as in 4th place and off the podium.
Oh,
Wow.
no.
Perfect host.
Yeah.
Perfect host. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Like a
But,
Canadian, we
Greg
were
has
polite.
Greg has also run the BC Open a few times, including 2 years ago, and it was the biggest ever event in Canada with close to 600 players. But, what he has done there is also, if you look at Team USA at these championships does not send the best players because they're not interested. They got to travel halfway around the world. They're going to get subsidized. There's no big money to play for. It's for the honor of representing your country, and hopefully you finish in the medals. On the other hand, Canada, there is a core group of players, largely from BC, occasionally Albertan, plus Thomas and Colleen from Ontario now, and a lady called Karen from Quebec.
Karen, yeah.
But it is the same core that have been there since 2017, and Craig has captained them from the beginning. So all he does is say, Brian, can you get me the contacts for these people so I can build our team this year? And then what we do is we pay for the entry fee, we pay for the jerseys. This year we paid a little bit towards their travel. I think we'll be more generous with the travel stipend for the 2 players who will go to Chengdu, China this year. But the bottom line is Craig has managed that project like a star, and the results speak for themselves. Gold medal for Canada, 2 bronzes. We should have been in the final this year in Australia, but we had a spit out that sent the semi to a playoff.
Yeah.
And
We've seen that.
He has. Otherwise, I would be doing that entire piece of work of building that team and organizing it and coordinating it. He says it's like herding a few cats, so it's not entirely easy. And the results speak for themselves. So that's why he got the award. And this year, it's going to go to someone else. In fact, more than one person whose names will not be mentioned today.
Not yet.
but they have been instrumental in the evolution of the game in our country. So that's another thing. In terms of, you mentioned to me in the outline of what we might talk about, you talked about this Canadian Disc Golf Tour. Now that was a baby of Parked Pro, great videography company based out of either side of the Rocky Mountain Divide in Alberta, BC.
Matt and Andre,
But they told me recently that they're going to retire from doing that. It's not sustainable with the rest of their lives. One of them has a very young child now. They've got to put more into their family. They also have real life jobs, and as you know, their model, while we have greatly appreciated everything they've done, and they are great guys, Andre and Matt. But their model as a two-man show with some volunteers doing commentary and helping them set up and so on at this or that tournament is, largely takes them away from home, and they don't have the time to do all the post-production and release the videos for some time following each one of the events that they did.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, they've said we can't do that anymore this year. We would be prepared to video one big tournament. So hopefully we can work it out that this will be the Nationals in Southern Ontario
Yes.
this summer. But the Canadian Disc Golf Pro Tour was their baby. I'm a bit skeptical about that because if you know the size of our country,
Mhm.
how spread out our disc golf communities are. I mean, you don't have players traveling to the from Ontario, going to the A tiers in BC and Alberta. We're only traveling long distance to go to nationals. So a Canadian disc golf tour, is a wonderful idea that we all love as disc golfers, but realistically, it's ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the traveling players to make it into a real tour or competition for who finishes on top and gets the cash bonus in MPO, FPO, and the other divisions. So
Right.
they have suggested that Can Disc Golf or Canada Disc Golf, which is a fledgling organization striving to become our national sports organization. They've come some ways in the few years of their existence. Craig is also at the helm of this initiative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. He does a lot.
Hey, we get
The
that.
one problem, PDGA Canada is PDGA activities in Canada, as I have described.
Yes.
It is not going to be our national association when it meets all the criterias demanded by Sports Canada for recognition.
Right.
That you need to be a Canadian organization run entirely by Canadians. So that is a separate ball of wax from PDGA Canada. We do support it. I partner with them. I've given them some funding to help them with their early in their evolution costs. And Craig and I are close, and as I said, he's the head guy of it. The challenge there is to do everything that they want to do, including have all these policies and procedures and position papers on issues like women and training in the sport and certificate programs. Takes a lot of work, and they've only got 2 or 3 volunteers.
Okay.
And so one thing I'm going to say on this show is if you've got the kind of skills that an organization like Canada Disc Golf would be looking for, business management, proposal writing, and the like, please consider volunteering for Canada Disc Golf because they need more arms to get them to the point where Sports Canada, who only opens up the windows for recognition of new sports every so often, to get the chance where we have the documents, the whole huge package of documents on Sports Canada's table when they open it up for the next round of applications, for them to say, yes, we hereby recognize Canada Disc Golf as our national sports organization.
Yeah.
And with that will come funding opportunities from Sports Canada, but it also gives added credibility to our provincial sports bodies like BCDSS, British Columbia Disc Sports Society, and ODSA,
Yes.
Ontario Disc Sports Association, which is essentially disc golf, and the other ones, Disc Golf Manitoba, Maritimes Disc Golf, and so on. I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a formalized provincial disc golf institution in Alberta yet. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think they are working on it, but yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
the
that
PSOs, or provincial sports organizations, will also have greater chances of securing provincial funding once there is a national recognized body.
Right.
So that is another key thrust not only of PDGA Canada, but of Canadian disc golf in general, that needs some assistance at the moment to move this faster along the track to official recognition.
Well, and hopefully we do have some listeners there, Brian, who can jump in on that. But if I can, you had mentioned nationals there, and I wanted to say, so last year we had the RIP at Haute Goat. It was a great success. It was a Q Series event. We saw a lot of big name pros come up to Canada. This year it's happening again. It's going to be a Q Series, but it's going to be Canadian nationals. Do you think this is going to be one of the biggest nationals we've had in a long time?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, there were some nationals a decade or so ago, but it's really become an annual thing the last 5 or 6 years, particularly because Ben Smith and PEI ran it 3 times and knocked it out of the park with the John Houck designed course there and 1 or 2 of the other courses in PEI. And that really got it going. And that's only that only started in the 2 or 3 years before COVID. And then, of course, we didn't have it for a couple of years during COVID. And now it's happened again. But there are some interesting discussions around nationals. Yes, it's going to be one of the biggest and the best, no doubt, this summer. The courses are supposed to be fantastic. I've only seen one of them because I don't play the sport very much,
right.
as you know. I sit here at work and I go on my bike and ride my bike. But yeah, it's going to be very big. They're thinking they're going to attract between 500 and 600 players. That's their capacity.
Amazing.
We hope that we'll get travelers from all across the country because that's what makes it a genuine nationals.
Yes.
And there are some interesting issues that we have to think about for the future. For example, all across Europe and in some of the other countries in the world, a national championships is only for players who are citizens
who are from that
residents
country.
Of that country. That is not the way the sport has evolved in USA and Canada. We can talk about the USDGCs, but the only reason they're called the USDGCs, in other words, the US Championships, is because they wanted to be called the US Disc Golf Open. And the PGA or whoever owns the US Ball Golf Open said, no, you can't have that name.
Wow.
Right.
That's why they're called the USDGC.
Gotcha.
Which compares it to the Swedish DGCs, national DGCs, which is only for Swedes.
Gotcha.
So at some point we have to say, do we want to change the character of this event so that it is, you have to be a Canuck or a resident in Canada for 2 years plus is the standard to qualify to play in the Canadian Nationals.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Some people will be for that and some people won't be for it. But that's an issue around that tournament that is always in the background. And at some point it may go that direction. But Nationals is also managed by Can Disc Golf. It used to be managed by PDGA Canada, but when Can Disc Golf started, I handed it over to them. And of course it is the event that gets the single largest event sponsorship from PDGA Canada. It gets $5,000 a pop. And we're also involved in underwriting the videography. For example, Park Pro did it the last 2 years, and so it was part of our contract with Park Pro.
Well, we had a good comment here from Colleen.
That's what I have about Nationals for you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
good. Just going to mention there that we had a good comment from Colleen. Glad to see that at least you're opening registration early for Canadians anyway. So that opens on February 2nd.
You can thank Can Disc Golf and the hosts for that. I had nothing to do with it.
Well, and speaking about those hosts too, Brian, like having Daryl Banks, Gabe Robinson, Project 15, Haute Goat, having these courses that Daryl and I have been dying to get out to Ontario to play, and we know we can do that this year. It's going to be amazing. We know just from last year having a big event with those players coming up. Like I had a great time. I saw you and I met you out there in Clearwater. It was a great job done out there by Dennis this year, but I just can't wait until next year or till this year's Nationals and getting out to Ontario. I think it's going to be fantastic. But what we should tell everybody is, yes, February 2nd, Groundhog Day, be ready to register. If you're a Canadian, you've got a week to get in there before anyone else from the US can come up and take a spot. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's another. I'll give all my Canadian friends who are listening a clue. You want to go play in a big tournament, whether it's the Worlds or Canadian Nationals, and you're not sure you can go. Well, sign up, lay down your money, get your spot, and then if you have to pull out, pull out.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you don't get your spot, you're not playing. That's all.
You're going anyway. Yeah, exactly.
You're going just to watch at that point if you don't.
Which will probably, if there's enough listeners, will probably just break the internet when registration.
Exactly.
Yeah, disc golf scene will not be working very well that day.
Well, Jeremy mentioned there that the Nationals is a Q Series event. We've had Q Series in Canada before. We've had Silver Series events in Canada before. Do you think we'll ever see a DGPT event up in Canada? And if not, why not? And what can we do to get an event up here? That was a lot of questions.
Well, the answer is it's difficult to say, and the reasons go to your question of why not. First of all, the cost of entry into the DGPT as a full event is huge.
Right.
I mean, we're talking 30,000 added. We're talking you have to give up a significant slice of your spectator revenue, and so on. So the commitment from the host team is huge by Canadian event standards.
Right.
The second thing is, the challenges for the DGPT itself. They have the additional logistical challenge of crossing the border with a lot of their equipment, which isn't always easy. It's a lot of extra paperwork. You've heard the nightmare stories about musicians going from Canada to play in a wedding in Chicago and being turned around at the border because they couldn't convince U.S. Customs that they weren't going to be paid for the work. So those are also challenges. And then then there's the competition for spaces on the DGPT, which is now has a summer swing in Europe. Considered but declined the chance of going to Australia and New Zealand about now. It's just too far to ask logistically. And they've also been approached by Mexico. Come do our A tier as a Q series, and they haven't said that to yes either. So the bottom line is, are we going to see it? It's hard to say because it comes down to a profound agreement between the host team and club and the DGPT, which is their business and not the PDGA's business.
Yes, definitely. Right. Well, that's another great piece of information because that's stuff that people ask these questions, but they don't really understand it. And you're really giving a lot of clarity to it, and we appreciate it. But Brian, one more, because we are going to get running out of time here soon. But one of the other ones that's a big thing is trying to grow disc golf in Canada. And there's definitely a lot of different markets that can grow it. We know it's predominantly men who are playing it. We can grow it in the junior side. We can grow it in the LGBTQ community side, and we can grow it in the women's side. What do we have going on this year for women's disc golf? We've got the Canadian women's events, the World Global events. Is Canada got anything planned to help develop the women's disc golf game?
Well, what we do, it comes down to initiatives at the grassroots or local level by and large. Groups of women who want to build women's plays. And that's why we've got the Canadian women's event, and on a larger scale, why the PDGA started the women's global event. And we also sponsor every one of those events. We also sponsor other women's initiatives that come to me asking, would you consider sponsoring us? Like the Nova Scotia Women's Series and the BC Women's Series. Beyond that, in terms of the PDGA, well, the PDGA is very conscious of the gender discrepancy in the gender imbalance, if you will, in our sport. I can tell you that when I started 25 years ago, it was 93-7 men to women percentage-wise, and then today it's 92-8.
So it hasn't changed much.
You know,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of efforts made the last few years, the women's global event being one of them. And if you look at some of the new competition standards, those are used at making it more attractive to play to give more opportunities to the people who, based on their age and gender, want to play in their preferred group, be it FA 50 or MJ 12. It gives added opportunities by requiring TDs to open any division that they do for men to open its female counterpart, at least for an initial period of time, so that if a FA 40 player wants to sign up, they get to play in FA 40.
Right.
Presuming MA 40 is on, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you know, as we get more women, and Colleen can certainly speak to this if you haven't interviewed her already.
Oh, we have, for sure.
One of the originals.
And directly involved in this issue. She lives it every day. There's a lot to be said for women enjoy playing more in women's run events. So the more women we have, the more women leaders we have, the more impact it's going to have in terms of growing the sport for women's players and those other visible minorities that you mentioned. There is an initiative called Queer Disc Golf based out of Toronto,
with Andy
who raise
Seawright,
a ton of money for LGBTQT initiatives in general, not just in disc golf. And I met them a couple of years ago, and we give them funding too.
Oh, that's awesome.
We've interviewed Andy Seawright. We've interviewed Colleen. She was one of the originals that we interviewed back in the day. When I say back in the day, we've been doing it so long, Jeremy. Another lady that we interviewed who's, I believe she's like she's like the...
With CWE, she does a lot. Is Andrea Michaud.
Is it the CWE or the GWE?
CWE.
The CWE. Andrea Michaud. Yeah, we've had her on the podcast as well. Yeah.
And she's done a great job and a great supporter as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's awesome, Brian. I'm going to get this to the wrap-up stage, and I usually have a little segue here. So, Daryl, Brian's definitely played on Toronto Island a few times. So I'm guessing that this next section that we're going to hit is going to be a little easier for Brian than it's been for some of our guests.
There you go.
You want to hit him with the next part?
This is it. This is just for you, Brian.
Now it's time for desert island discs. Picture this. You've taken a relaxing cruise, however the ship goes down. You manage to swim to an island. And fortunately for you, there's an 18-hole disc golf course. Which 3 discs are you taking with you on the island?
There you go. There's not that much more to it other than that. If you had to take 3 discs with you, 3 discs that you can't live without, which disc would you take with you?
Of this.
Yeah.
Here's the answer. Well,
Okay.
This goes to my playing heyday.
Yes.
So these are the discs that I threw the most and that I got to know the best.
Right.
So my putter and approach disc would be a beadless Aviar, circa mid 80s to early 90s.
Right.
My mid-range disc would either be an original rock, the smaller diameter rock, or the San Marino rock, the classic version of the rock that is sought after by collectors.
Yeah.
Both extremely stable discs. So going back to what I said originally, throwing whatever angle you threw, and we were all good at reverse curve or Anheuser, these discs held their line all the way. And then for drivers, if it was earlier in my career, I would say Gazelle. And if it was later in my career, I would say CE Valkyrie.
Okay.
Right. I think that San Marino rock, I believe that was Martin Hendel's go-to disc as well. I think he says that that's one of his discs that he would keep as well.
Yeah.
And if this is a little bit of a thing that we've added onto this question as well, if you could take one course and transport it to this island, so you could only play one course for the rest, which course would you pick? Yeah, I know. We kind of threw that one on you.
Well, one of my greatest wins was on the course that is called the Canyon in Florida.
Okay.
This was I flew down there in January, not having played for 6 weeks. Told myself, you're on holiday, have fun.
Yeah.
And I went out and I had put no pressure on myself. and I went out and shot the lights out and won Masters by 16, I think.
Wow.
Which was cool. So that would be one of
Yeah.
them because it's a great course as well. But in terms of other courses, I mean, I'd have a hard time not saying the Beast in Nokia.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
That's a place like we're excited that we're going to get over to Ontario and get to play the great Ontario courses that are there. But after that, when we get over the pond, definitely the Beast is on the list. Hey,
That's that would. I mean, people talk about Maple Hill being their bucket list course, but I think the Beast or Crow Call.
yeah, there's a lot of
the
great
course out
ones
there as well. Yeah.
Well, Brian, thanks so much for
I
your
would
time.
say Crocol, I mean, it looks great, but I haven't been there.
Oh,
I've been
give
to
it time.
Beast
You'll end up
a bunch.
there at some point. I know it. Whether you're riding a bike or doing something disc golf related, you'll get there. But we do appreciate you being on here. But what we don't want to do is let you go before giving you a chance. Is there anything that we missed or anything you wanted to bring up before we do let you go?
No, I just want to thank you guys for what you're doing for the sport and promoting it across Canada, and for inviting me on so I could share my knowledge and experience and insights into the sport. And otherwise, everybody who's listening, if you have any questions for me, the easiest way to reach me, easy address to remember, canada@pdga.com.
Oh yeah, that's
Send me an
That's an
email
easy
with
one.
your thoughts, your ideas, and if you've heard me talk a lot about PDGA Canada sponsorships, we don't sponsor everything. Like we won't sponsor run-of-the-mill B tiers because we can't afford to. There's only so
Right.
much money, and if we said we'll sponsor your B tier, then every other B tier will say, "Well, what about us?"
Yeah.
And then we're just getting into check exchanges with hundreds of tournaments, basically.
Makes
So
sense.
we fund the biggest tournaments, and we fund the tournaments aimed at minorities.
Right.
But if you go to pdj.com and you select international from the top menu, and then underneath that you'll find PDJ Canada. Amongst other things, there is a one-page summary on the sponsorship program. Give that a quick read, and if you think you've got something that meets our broad criteria, send it over to me.
Great.
Yeah. That's
Well-
awesome.
Well, Brian, thank you. You're welcome back anytime. So if you've got anything else you'd like to share with us in the future, just let us know, and we'll be sure to have you back on the show.
I'm sure.
I have one more thing.
I was just
Yeah.
going to say, I'm
One
sure
more
we've
thing.
just scratched the surface, but go ahead.
I am going to try and start a PDJ Canada social media presence this year. It involves hiring someone for a few hours a week because I'm too busy to take that on as well. But look for us hopefully to have a Facebook page up for you guys to communicate directly with us and for us to share what's happening in Canada, for what's happening in BC, for that people in the Maritimes may not know, and so on. What's happening in the Yukon? We know there's a cool A tier run by Ryan Norkey, who you mentioned
Yes.
a while
he's
ago.
gonna
I've been
be
to
on
the
our-
Yukon many years ago. Every Canadian should go to the Yukon once in their lifetime. It is gorgeous. There is a spirit of the wild up there, unlike anywhere else. And these are the sort of things that we can spread the word about through having a social media presence as well. So that's
Oh,
one new thing that hopefully is going to happen this year.
Do you see how
Fantastic.
it all comes full circle, Jeremy? Because we're
Yes.
actually going to be talking to Ryan Norquay after we get off speaking to you, Brian. So
yeah. We're going to have him on a little later on
Great
tonight.
segue.
So that's great. Thanks for leading us in there.
Yeah.
And we look forward to, I know you'll likely be at Nationals. Why wouldn't you be? It's just in your backyard. So we'll see you there in the summer, if not before.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thanks.
guys, for all you do, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Brian.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Awesome. Daryl, all I have to say is Brian Hoeniger, wow.
Yeah.
That's what I've got.
I mean, we knew we were going to get history. We knew we were going to get,
I thought we'd get a little slice or a little piece, but like such rich, good information.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, we just barely scratched the surface of the stories that he could tell.
Yeah. So, and the thing is how transparent he was with a lot of that information as well. Like, I didn't know that he would be able to give us so much detail about where our funds are going and how they're being spent in our PDGA Canada dollars, and that they are staying in Canada. And it's just amazing. So it was really eye-opening. I appreciate I had it in my notes here as a potential, and I was like, did we just win Canadian disc golf podcasting? Are we done? Do we just sign off and this is it, or what?
I mean, we say it every week. What a great guest. Surely we've peaked. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say it, Jeremy.
Okay.
So we thought we peaked when we had Thomas Gilbert and Chantel Badinsky on the same episode.
Right.
We could arguably say that was the prince and princess of Canadian disc golf.
On that episode, yeah.
Prior to that, I think we already had the queen of Canadian disc golf. We had
Carrie Neal.
Carrie Neal.
Yeah.
Now, arguably the king
Yes.
of Canadian disc golf.
The one thing that we're very lucky about, though, is there's so much royalty in Canadian disc golf,
exactly.
whether it's Colleen McInnes or many of the other people that we talk to.
Probably shouldn't be pinning these labels on people, but that's the way it feels anyway.
Exactly. But no, I agree with you. It's just like we're hitting the top, and this is what I love. And it's all Canadians, and it's just fantastic. Or it has to do with something Canadian. So
absolutely.
This is the part. What do we say here, Daryl? You want to take this one on?
Sure. Give me 1 second. If you like what you've seen,
yes,
don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It greatly helps us. Leave a comment on the video. Even though we've been reading all your comments, some of the comments we get to, some of them, we post if they're relevant or if we see them. We know you guys have been commenting there. Leave a comment on the video. Go check out our Instagram as well.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 1 second because I do
and
have.
He'll roll that up there for us.
Yeah. Let me put those in the chat.
Yeah.
Instagram,
YouTube,
TikTok,
you name it.
We're on there as well. Go follow us. Follow us everywhere. We do giveaways.
We do.
As we showed at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're not, if you've done all of that, as we say, and you want to sponsor us more and support us more, the best ways you can do that is either join our Patreon, or if you just want to do it for one time, check out our Linktree and buy us a beer. We appreciate that. And of course, support our sponsor, Cardinal Disc Golf, and use Chain Out and get 10% off.
Absolutely. You're so much better at it than me.
And we'll also say thank you to all our Patreon members so far. We really appreciate all of you. And stay tuned. In about 15 minutes, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to start our Around the Basket episode. There'll be a free link in the Patreon. You can go check it out. And what are we going to do? We're going to talk to Ryan Orke, and it's going to be an awesome conversation. I can't wait for it.
Absolutely.
So, which disc do you think you're going to throw? If you could, out of his Desert Island discs, which one would you put in your hand? I think it's got to be that San Marino Rock.
Exactly.
And you know where you're going to take it. You're going to take it to Hermitage, I bet.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, I don't know. I've aced it so many times now.
Yeah.
Hole 13 at Hermitage.
So, what do you think would happen with the San Marino Rock?
If I had a San Marino Rock, I would put it on a shelf. I wouldn't throw it.
But if you had two.
But if I had two, what I would do is I'd take one of those San Marino rocks. I would throw it on a reverse curve.
Yes.
I would go around the trees on the left-hand
side.
side.
So you'd go old school.
You got to go old school with a San Marino Rock.
100%.
Old school, left-hand side, reverse curve, around the trees. And there's only one place that disc is going to go.
Yeah, and it could never do something when it's on its way there, right? It couldn't.
It would never.
It would never do what?
It would never.
Chain out!
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, we'll catch you later. See you in a bit.